Hey YouTube, MDEX Music back again with our continued series on reharmonization using Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro. Today we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about modal interchange, we're going to talk about low interval limit, and we're also going to touch on upper structure triads. So let's get started. All right, so upper structure triads. Let's talk about like what, how, and why. So what we have here basically is just a means of contextualizing the melody and doing so by using chord extensions and leaning really heavily on the chord scale of the original harmony to do so. So like, what is an upper structure triad? Just basically think of an upper structure triad is another note grouping or another triad that comes from the same chord scale as the harmony that we're using it on top of, and also includes a non-chord tone, uses an extension with it, at least one. So why would we do this? We would do this to kind of separate the melody from the harmony in a way that gives it its own weight, its own identity, and contextualizes it within something else that isn't the harmony, but also goes really well with the harmony. So it's a tricky thing, and you have to know exactly what to look for, and we're going to show you exactly what to look for when doing this. So previously in our series, we taught you guys how to get to the chords where we're at now, how to use like secondary dominance and reharmonization and substitutions and all that. And we did that with Oh Danny Boy. We got away from the primary chords in B flat and have ultimately landed on what we have in front of us now: F minor 7, B flat 7, 9, E7 sharp 11, and all these really cool voicings. So if you haven't checked out those videos, now might be a good time to go do that so you understand where we're about to go from here. So having said that, let's use some upper structure triads on the second measure. So we have the pickup measure into our first measure here, and what we're going to reharmonize is this B flat 7 on the third beat and this E7 on the fourth beat. And in order to do so, we need to understand the chord scales that this harmony that we have right now comes from. So Mapping Tonal Harmony lets us do that really easily. All I have to do is get rid of the function button right there, and boom, right underneath all the chords are those harmonies chord scales, where they come from. So the B flat 7 comes from a mixolydian, the E7 sharp 11 that we have there is a Lydian flat 7, and so on. So it lets you know all of the origins of our harmony, all right? And that's really important if you're going to use an upper structure triad on top of the existing harmony. You got to know what chord scale we're dealing with, because that lets you know what triads you can use to contextualize your melody, which is what we're trying to do. Remember that. We're trying to keep the melody consistent with the harmony, but also give it its own significant weight and separate sort of sound from the harmony that also goes well with the harmony. So how do we know what exists, for example, in B flat mixolydian? Like, what triads hang out in that mode, right? Like, so if it was C, it'd be really easy. I could see C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and C. Those are pretty clear to see. We're taking that same concept and just applying it to a different mode, all right? So I would recommend, if you haven't checked it out already, Tessitura. We have a bunch of videos on that already. That whole app is just built around chord scales and the triads you get from chord scales. It's really useful. It's a really cool tool. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to switch over to Tessitura. So here we are in Tessitura Pro, and we have our B flat mixolydian mode all loaded up and ready to go. Bottom left hand corner, we can see all the notes that are in that mode. It's basically a B flat scale with a lowered seventh, so that's why the A flat is there. Up above that, we have that same exact chord scale superimposed into the circle of fifths, so we can see all the notes that are in the chord scale relative to the circle of fifths. And in the right hand portion of the screen, we have all the main information about our mode, the fact that it's mixolydian. The substructures we're looking at right now currently are major triads, right? Sorry, didn't mean to do that. Are major triads. So what major triads can I get from the mixolydian mode? It says so right down here: B flat, A flat, and E flat. All right. So that's where we're gonna get, or how we're gonna get all the different triads relative to this chord scale, relative to B flat mixolydian, which is what we want to revoice the B flat 7 that we currently have in our harmonization of O Danny Boy. So we have to consider the melody. On the third beat of this melody, we have an F, all right? So I look at the major triads. I have isolated right now just the major triads from that cluster of chords I just went over, all those triads. We have B flat, A flat, and E flat. Those are the major triads I can get from B flat mixolydian. So I look at those three triads, I consider my melody note, which is F, and I see that only one of them really has an F in it, and that one is B flat. And that's really no good to me because we're already on a B flat, and that does nothing for our purposes of contextualizing the harmony into something else and giving it more weight and giving it more movement and all the stuff we talked about earlier. A flat doesn't work because there's no F in the A flat chord, and neither does E flat because there's no F there either. So what I'm gonna do is look at the minor triads that are from the chord scale and see if we have any better luck. So I'm gonna go over to the chords, look at our minor triads, and now I see, there we go. So there's an F minor. If our note is F, F minor works perfectly. I could also see that there's a C minor. That doesn't go real well. G minor could work if I made it a G minor 7. That would give us the F, and that F is in the chord scale, so I could do that too. But since we're just talking about triads right now, let's stick to F minor. So now I know if I have a B flat 7 on my harmony, I can put an F minor on top of it and be good to go. And I want to voice that F minor, by the way, in an inversion that has the melody as the top note. So I'm going to go with a first inversion F minor here and have my B flat 7 still existing on the bottom. So now I've taken the melody note and contextualize it within a triad that comes from the same chord scale as our harmony to give it much more depth and richness, and now it's kind of something separate from the harmony but also goes well with the harmony. And with this sort of approach, you can come up with all kinds of really cool movements within your harmonization. And it's these little details that we talked about time and time again that are going to set your arrangement or what you're doing apart from something else that might not sound exactly right and nobody knows exactly why. A lot of people don't consider the chord scale when they're reharmonizing something, and that's why it doesn't really kind of mesh well to the ear. So what we're doing now is looking at like the nuts and bolts of the harmony in depth to see what works well on top of it, not only melodically, but harmonically too. So we're gonna repeat the same exact process that we did before, just with a different mode. So I'm gonna tell Tessitura to go look for all my Lydian flat 7 stuff. So I type in Lydian, I get all these different variants of Lydian. I want Lydian flat 7. So we have a raised 4th, and then we've lowered the 7th of in this case, E. So we want E. I'm gonna spin the circle around till E. There we go. Gets on the top. So now we have it there, Lydian flat 7. We have all the notes in the Lydian flat 7 mode. Bottom left-hand corner, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D natural, and E. And then in the right-hand portion of the screen, all the relevant information to us that we want, the triads relevant to that chord scale. So in the same way you get triads from a C scale, and the same way we got it from the B flat mixolydian, we get it again with our new chord scale, E Lydian flat 7. So if I want to look at all the major triads that come from this chord scale, I can see that an E exists, and then an F sharp major also exists. If I want to see the minor chords, I can also do that. My minor triads are B minor and C sharp minor. So keep in mind, we're revoicing our E7, but also more to the point, the melody note is D. Okay, we came from F, now we're on D, so I have to consider that note when figuring out which upper structure triad to use on top of E7. So when we looked at the major chords we could get from this chord scale, we saw E and F sharp. And E is what we already have, so that does us no good. And F sharp doesn't have the melody note. Not only does it not have the melody note, it significantly clashes with the melody note. So we can't use that. When we look at our minor chords, however, we have B minor and C sharp minor. and B minor works because that D is our melody note and it's the third of our chord. So what we had before with the F minor on top of the B flat 7, if I wanted to go to a B minor over E7, that sounds really cool. So there you have the melody note weighted within the F minor chord, moving to the melody note D, weighted within a B minor chord, all on top of our existing or pre-existing harmony of B flat 7 and E7, or sub 5 of 4, right? Giving us this. And eventually going to go here to the 4 chord. So B minor is a really good candidate. However, it doesn't really reflect the Lydianness of the chord scale we're using because it doesn't have that raised 4. That's the defining characteristic of any Lydian scale. So let's find a triad that has both a D in it and also reflects the Lydian nature of the chord scale that we're using to revoice our harmony. That is to say, let's find something with a D and an A sharp. So another note on upper structure triads, don't bother with diminished chords when doing this, all right? Stick to major, minor, and augmented chords. The diminished chords just don't work. There's too much dissonance, there's too much clash, and you almost never see them. Right, so we're not gonna be worrying about or even looking for diminished chords here. We already ruled out major. We just saw our 2 minor options and said one of them was good to go. We're not using diminished, so that really only leaves us with augmented. All right, so when we look for any augmented triads that we can get from our E Lydian flat 7, we see that there are 3. We got F sharp augmented, A sharp augmented, and D augmented. How did we get 3 augmented triads from one mode? Well, they're all the same exact thing. The 3 notes that are in F sharp augmented are the same 3 notes that are in A sharp augmented are the same 3 notes that are in D. So what we're gonna look at is there a D present? Well, yeah, there's a D present on all of these chords, right? It's the 5th of the F sharp, it's the 3rd of the A sharp, and it's the root of the D augmented. So, having said that, we're gonna voice the F sharp augmented in a way that has the melody as the highest note. So we're going F sharp, A sharp, D in that order, and we're putting it on top of our sub 504, we're putting on top of E7, and that's going to go to our 4 and resolve like that. So if we rewind, we had originally our B flat 7, we found an F minor, works well on top of that, our melody note is there, and it's the highest note of the voicing. We're gonna then go to our, what we're turning into a G flat augmented chord on top of the E7, and that's gonna resolve nicely to the 4 chord, okay? So there's our upper structure triad sequence. So what we're gonna do is have the lower interval limit discussion and the modal interchange lesson on separate videos, our next videos as a matter of fact. So stick around for those, and if any of this is at all helpful, just click on the like and subscribe button. That kind of helps us produce more and more content for you guys and teach you guys more about music theory and hopefully build an appreciation for music. And also, ideally, ultimately, help you be more creative. So thanks for watching.